Hey everyone, Japheth here. Today we're going to talk about building NPCs and a few related topics. So it's been a little while since our last video. This is a continuation of the previous series, but I'm not using the same demo world that I had built in the previous two videos. So if you are watching these sequentially, this is a different demo world that was built much later. So without further ado, the topics that we're going to talk about today are basically what NPCs are in FutureMUD, how to build them, some of the options that you have, a couple of advanced topics like adding AI behaviors and onload progs, and spawners. So how do you actually get these things in game? So, firstly, it's important to note that NPCs are basically templates. So what we're going to be building here is a template. So everything that you do with NPCs generally is going to be using the NPC command. And what these things are templates to generate a character. So once you actually load an NPC, it becomes a character just the same as a player character. And that's separate from its template. So you've got to separate those two concepts in your mind. Secondly, it's also important to note that the templates, like items, have revision numbers. So they go through the revision process where you need to submit them, review them, approve them. There can be different revisions that show what changes were made at each revision. Unlike items, there's no way to catch up NPCs that were previously loaded with a earlier template. So if you make a revision to, I don't know, change what skills an NPC template has, that won't update the characters in the world that have already been generated, because they may have in the meantime gone and earned their own skills just like a character could have. So anyway, let's start by NPC list. That's one of the ways in which you can see all of the NPCs. There's already a couple here from my playing around. You see that they are split into two types, simple and variable. So just briefly on what those mean, a simple NPC template generates the same character every single time. So no matter what you run, it's going to generate an NPC with the same parameters, the same skills, the same name. Everything is the same about it. So when you would use that is, for example, if you were making a character who is, a named NPC. So say you had a named NPC. If for whatever reason you happen to lose that NPC somewhere and you need to reload it, you don't want it to change. You don't want to, have to rebuild that character. So that's one scenario in which you might use a simple NPC prototype. The other scenario is when you have maybe a monster race or an animal race that doesn't need to vary. For example, you might have, to borrow from an SOI example, you might have wargs as a race, and perhaps the wargs don't really have any variables, and you want to load a specific warg with the exact same skills every single time, and it doesn't matter that there are 5 carbon copies of that warg loaded in the world, because they're just a bad guy that you're going to kill. So that's simple templates. Variable templates are basically a random generation of a character. So they sort of set the parameters around how the character is going to be generated. They're more about setting options and percentage chances for things to happen. And every time you run the variable template, every time you load the NPC, it's going to generate a new NPC. So we're going to build both. And I'm also going to show you one way of converting a variable NPC that you load. If that NPC happens to become like a named NPC, you load up a random variable guard and he happens to do something in an event, you want to turn him into a permanent NPC so that you don't lose him, you can actually do that. So first of all, we're going to create a new NPC. So the command for that is NPC edit new, and you have to specify simple or variable. So we're going to start with a simple NPC. All right. So here's what our NPC definition looks like. You can see a bunch of different things, some of which might be self-explanatory, others not. But anyway, it's usually a good idea to start with the race as the first thing that you set, because a lot of the other things depend on the race being set. So we're going to make this a human. And as you can see, that has set up some default stuff, like for example, you know, the stats that humans have. We'll give this one an ethnicity. Now I've used the Middle Earth culture pack on here, so we're going to make this guy into a Easterling. All right. And we also will give a culture. I think Easterling is also a culture. Yes, it is. So, what are races, ethnicities, and cultures? You may not be familiar with that terminology if you haven't had to build with the engine before. So, race is pretty much analogous to a species. So, humans, elves, dwarves could all be races, but equally dogs could be races, elephants could be races, etc. So a race determines quite a lot about what a character can be and do, and that's the primarily like a species. The ethnicity, on the other hand, breaks down some of the parameters of the race. Like for example, it sets the ordinary range of characteristics. So for example, if a human has hair colors, the ethnicity might say that this ethnicity typically has brown hair colors or blonde hair colors or black hair colors or red or whatever you want to make it. You can also have the ethnicities have a little bit of an impact on their temperature tolerability if you want to. I use that in the animal seeder, for example. Bear types are set up as ethnicities, so polar bears have quite a pushed in the direction of cold weather tolerance, and that's done through the ethnicity. And the culture mostly determines codedly how things are named, and what names are applicable to the NPC. I also tend to use in my building the culture to determine the starting skills. So the ethnicity is supposed to be your, what your heritage is, whereas your culture is how you were raised and what society you were raised in, etc. Anyway, that's you can see all of those ethnicities and cultures currently have building commands, just the same as anything else. There's a lot of them, as you can see. Cultures similarly. Races, I'm in the process of making a building command. It's not quite ready to go yet, so I won't show you that, but you can just do show races to see a list of them, and you can see there all the different animal species that I've got in there as well. But all of the core races. Now, these are all set up as having parents as well. So all of the so-called humanoid races are all based on organic humanoid, which is itself based on humanoid. And they draw a lot of their parameters from organic humanoid, so it makes sure that, for example, all humanoids have the same stats, and all humanoids have things like hair colors and whatnot. If you were setting this up to have like a android or robot race, you would then branch them off from humanoid. One of the reasons for doing this, by the way, the humanoid body type has all of the like outside body parts, all the wearable locations, whereas the organic humanoid adds in all of the organs. So this way you can have like robots that can wear, if you set it up so that or the seeder does, the seeder sets it up so that everything is targeted at the humanoid, like, your humanoid robots can wear the same clothes as humans and elves can, but they don't necessarily get all the organs. They have their own branch that adds robot parts and all that sort of stuff. So that's the way that that's set up. But anyway, back to our back to our NPC. So we've now got some of his core properties set. We're going to make it into a he, by the way. We're going to give this character a name of Amos Newbie. Not 100% sure why that is not working. Pausing for a moment. Alright, so yes, I had not set up the regular expression in the seeder correctly. I will fix that. So, we've set the name of this NPC to Amos Newbie. I know it's not a very Easterling appropriate name, but I'm not that creative. And we'll set the short description to a tall, muscular man. Now, notice that in this case we have a whole bunch of characteristics which may not necessarily match our description. Those were randomly generated when just as a start, because everything has to have characteristics and you don't necessarily want to go through and fill these in every single time. Most PC descriptions will use a complex markup system to refer back to those characteristics, and then if those characteristics change, like if they change their hairstyle or their frame changes or whatever, it will change to match it. You don't usually do that with simple NPCs. You can, but you don't. You don't have to. But people can still look at that NPC and see these characteristics, like a lot of the criminal code, for example. If the character is not identified, there's a percentage chance for that to happen. That it'll report them by their characteristics, like a brown-haired, blue-eyed man committed this crime. So it is still important that you have a quick look at those. And in this case, we're just going to change them to match his description. So it's a variable. So NPC set variable. We're going to put frame. We're going to change it to muscular. And person, we're going to just change to man. Alright. I'm not going to fill out a full description for him because I'm lazy. But what we're going to do is we're going to give him a height. He's going to be 190 centimeters tall. He's going to weigh 100 kilos. 25 years old seems about right. We can change his handedness. We can give him some skills. So probably important that we give him a language. So we'll give him Logothig, which is the Easterling language, at 200. Language skills, by the way, should generally be set somewhere above 150 to 200. That's the way the caps are usually set up, and that's actually very important so that the player experience is appropriate. You don't want them missing words in every single sentence, so you really want to bias it towards success once they know the language. We'll also give him Westron, but we'll give him it at a lower level. And we'll give him, not middle, medium edge at say 50, which is adroit in the old terminology. You can leave the accents off, in which case it will generate a random one, but we'll actually give him some actual accents. So we'll give him, he can have a Ravanian accent. And Westron. We'll give him a, let's just say a Darwinian Alright, so he's got languages, accents, skills. He's got a description. We probably should set his attributes. So I don't know. Let's give him an agility of 15. Attribute. We'll give him a strength of 18. Con of 12. And he dump statted will. Alright. This guy's pretty much ready to go. So we will submit him. We will review. And we'll approve. Now we can load this guy. So let's load Amos Newbie. He's number 6. There's our tall, muscular man. We'll look at his score just to prove that, he's got decent agility, good con, super strength, 25-year-old, like we said. Rovanian accent, logothig, it's all there. Easterling culture, blah, blah, blah. So that's how you create a simple NPC. You've got an alternate way of doing a simple NPC. So let's just make a new simple one. Say I want to make a named character. I'm coming up to do an event. I need to make a named character. I have a vague idea of what I need the named character to do, but I don't know. I don't really have a strong opinion of what they're called. You're lazy like me. So I'm going to make this one a dwarf. And I'm going to give them a dwarven culture. Oh, probably better look and see what the actual dwarven culture is. There's a bunch of them. Alright. We'll give him a Ereborian culture. Show ethnicities for dwarves. Oh, it's not going to filter it. Where are we? Dwarf, dwarf, dwarf. We'll make him a long beard. Alright, now what we can do, see here it says randomize. So remember right now this guy is completely undescribed. We're not feeling very inspired to write a dwarven description. I haven't set a gender. NPC set gender male in this case. Alright, let's randomize. So it's given us a name, and that's based on the dwarven naming culture. It's given us a short description. It's given us a full description. It's set up his height, his weight. Looks like it's rolled the stats randomly as well. It's done all the characteristics. It's done all the work for you. You might take this as a base and make a few alterations. Obviously, you still need to add things like skills and accents and whatnot. But if you're not feeling inspired, but you need to create an NPC, why not let the random generator do it for you? So that's one thing that you can do there. While we have this guy as well, we're going to give him an onload prog. So onload progs basically fire whenever you load an NPC. I'm going to do a separate video at some point talking about progs, but for now I've made one for us to look at. It's called demo onload. So really what this one is doing, it takes a parameter of a character. So all onload progs take a parameter of a character, and the character that it's passing in is the one that's generated. So basically it generates the NPC, and then before it puts it in the world, it runs this prog on it. And you can do anything you want in the prog, so anything within the capability of progs anyway. So in this particular case, it's loading an item, which is a top hat. It's giving the item to the character. It's forcing them to do the command wear top hat. You can actually do that through commands and make it silent, but I just wanted to show that you can do it through forcing. And then I'm setting a default combat setting. That's actually one of the common things that I use onload progs for, to be honest. But I also use it for things like outfitting enforcers. The enforcer template loads in and runs an onload prog in FutureMUD and gives them all their gear and that kind of stuff. So NPC set onload. They can only have one onload, either 0 or 1 onload progs. So it's going to run that one when he loads. All right, so let's submit this one. Let's load our dwarf. Now, as you can see, they wore the top hat. So there you go. They're wearing the top hat. I'm sure if we did combat set on this one, outboxer as we said. So yeah, there you go. So it basically ran all the things that happen in that prog. So that's one thing you can do with simple NPCs. And just to show you, it loads the same every single time. As you can see, same person. So there we go. We have 3 copies of the same person. So that's simple NPCs. So now we're going to move on to variable NPCs. So to do that, we're going to make a variable. All right, so immediately the variable template has much different stuff in many respects than the simple template does, because you are more setting up chances and patterns and models rather than actual values. So with the variable NPC templates as well, you'll notice when we were making the NPCs before with the simple NPC templates, the name of the template is just the name of the NPC. Whereas with the variable ones, we can actually give it a specific name. So let's say this one is going to be called variable Gondorian. Name. But you could say, this is a template for a Gondorian guard or a Gondorian soldier or a Gondorian commoner or whatever. And they would generate, you could set up different parameters around that. So we generally need to always start with race again. Let's make this one a human. We've already said we're going to go Gondorian, so let's go Gondorian. And there's also a culture called Gondorian. So a couple of things got set automatically by us doing that. So first of all, the gender chances was set automatically when we did the race. So by default, if the race has male and female, it's going to do them as roughly 50-50. If you've got non-binary enabled as an option, it will put that at a much lower priority. If you don't, it'll just be male-female. If it's got neuter gender or it's got whatever, it'll set those up too. You can edit those gender chances, like maybe your soldier template should bias towards men or something along those lines. You know what you can, what you want to do with that. So, and to do that, you're basically using this one here. You set gender, then the gender that you want to set, and then the weight you want to give it. If you put it as 0, it removes the possibility of that being rolled. Similarly, it's given us some name profiles that are appropriate for the culture. So the culture was Gondorian, so it's chosen Dunedain naming cultures. Actually, those are random name profiles. So random name profiles are basically lists of names and the rules for generating them. So for example, we're looking at Dunedain male. It's from the Sindarin naming culture for men, and we can actually use this random names command to show this off. So let's do random names Dunedain. male. Did I spell that right? Hang on. Oh, we've got to specify the culture first. Manish Sindarin Dunedin male. So here it's just use the rules in that naming culture to generate some random names. So the Sindarin Manish one does like a patronymic style, you know, blah, son of X, and the random name profile basically has all the random stuff. My seeders come with a bunch of them. You'll always get everything up here, no matter what you run, and everything below here comes from the Middle Earth seeder. There's also a Roman seeder that has a whole bunch of ancient world names, and eventually over time I'll roll out more ones for other things as well. But yeah, basically, in this particular case, that's how these names are getting generated. We also need to add some height weight models. I'm working on getting those to be automatic, but it's not always working easily. So height weight models basically determine the statistical rules around, because remember, this is a variable NPC, so we don't actually know, you know, we're not saying that they're always going to be this height, but we need to know what the range is. So these, I use a normal distribution basically. So you specify, for example, if we use human male and human female, which is what we're going to do, we have an average height and a standard deviation for that. We have an average BMI, that's not supposed to be centimeters. Obviously BMI is unitless, and a standard deviation for BMI, and it will generate the heights and weights based on that. So we will go height weight model. For male, we want human male. For female, we want human female. And for non-binary, we're just going to use human female. We also didn't set a name profile. For non-binary, random name, non-binary, and we'll set that as, actually it's got to be the other way around. We'll do, we'll have our non-binaries use female names. So Dunedin female non-binary. There we go. So we've got all of the core stuff. This is technically everything you need to get an NPC in there. It's obviously got an age range. There are actually two ways to set that. You can either say that I want an NPC that is between, say, 17 and 50 years old directly, or you can specify age categories, you know, because, for example, maybe you're making an elf and you haven't memorized exactly what the ages for elves are for different things, so you want, and if you, the different way you can do that is with age range. If you just type age range, it will tell you what the categories are. So maybe you want somebody from young adult through to adult only. So at 50 years old, they become an elder. So basically you've got 16 to 50. Or if you wanted to go all the way up to venerable, 16 and 90, there you go. So that's one way you can do that. With skills, with variable NPCs, it's not the same as setting with simple. If you remember with simple, we basically just set the skill and the level. We actually need to set the rules about what skills it gets. So what it starts with is you give it a skill and which skill you're going to give it. Same so far, right? The percentage there is the percentage chance to actually have the skill. So not every NPC, unless you put it at 100%, not every NPC that loads will have that skill. You give it an average value and you give it a standard deviation. Now, don't be too intimidated by the statistical side of things, because it actually does tell you what the consequences of your choice are, so you can change it. So let's say this Westron as a language, they're going to have a 100% chance to have it, and we want them to have 175 and I don't know, 10 as standard deviation. So as it says there, that's all of what we said. And it will show you within 3 standard deviations, 99.5% of the time, this will roll between 145 and 205. So that gives you like if you enter something and you go, well, that doesn't seem quite right, you can kind of play around with the standard deviation until you find a range that makes sense for you. And keep in mind, it's a normal distribution, so it'll be very biased towards the middle of that distribution. It will, anybody that's on the extremes of that will be outliers. We'll give them a chance, medium blunt of, say, I don't know, let's say 40% for all the weapon skills, and they can have them at 40 with a standard deviation of 5. So it's going to be between 25, which is low familiar, and 55, which is like high adroit. We'll do that with a couple of different weapon skills. And then we'll say that they have a 50% chance to know how to swim, but we'll give them a much bigger standard deviation. They might be a master or a novice at that, and that's probably fine. So yeah, we're still good. We could still load this one. We can change the attribute total. So at the moment, it's just rolling as per the race's attribute total, which is the same as what PCs do, incidentally. So this NPC will be just as powerful as a normal NPC. You can change that if you want to make a particular variable template more or less powerful on average. And you can also set priority attributes, and it will always select the priority attributes as their first. So say you said, I don't know, Gondorians, they are really, really lucky. Did I do luck in this one, or aura? Luck, yep. So you say that they always prioritize their luck. So we are going to do attribute luck. So they will prioritize luck and then randomize the rest of it. But luck will always be their highest attribute. And we're also going to give this one a different actually, no, we won't give him an onload prog. We might give him an AI routine. So AI routine, there's not currently a building command for these. They have to be made individually, and I supply a couple of them with the Cedar, but I really need to work on getting more of them out there. These are the ones that come with the Cedar, by the way. Enforcer turns them into an Enforcer, which makes them interact with the legal system. The 2 commandable ones, commandable owner basically sets it so that if you set a particular variable on the NPC to say who the owner is, that owner can command it and nobody else can. Commandable clan out ranks is kind of like classic RPI engine behavior, where if the person has the same clan as the NPC and they have a higher rank in that clan, they can command them, otherwise they can't. Basic door guard turns them into a door guard, so if you put that on an NPC and then have the NPC execute the door guard command, they will start opening and closing doors when people knock, and nod at them and start moving towards them and that kind of stuff. Spar partner will accept sparring invitations from PCs, so you could have that to be a training dummy or just an NPC in a clan hall or something that will spar with people in a friendly way. Random wander does what it says on the box. It makes the NPC randomly wander around, and aggressive to all other species means that it will attack anything it sees that's not the same race as it is. I've got a bigger list just from LabMud to show you what's possible, but you've got things like tracking aggressors like the ant bots in LabMud that will lock onto things and then track towards them. Aggressive pathers are a slightly different option. The bots that are in the dread zone use those to path either towards, or they use aggressive pather to path towards enemies, and then they use path to location to either go back to their home or track towards the power plant rooms and stuff in the dread zone. Combat end basically is a logic type that lets it know when to accept surrenders and that kind of stuff. Scavengers destroy items, so I use those for the Roombas to keep the world clean. And Wild Animal Herd lets them interact. We're not going to cover that in this video, but there's a group AI function as well that you can make it interact with. Anyway, I will roll more of those out in the seeder over time. In this particular case, we are just going to give this random Gondorian a random wanderer. All right, and you can remove them again. So that's basically everything we need. So let's submit review, NPC review all, and accept. All right, let's just go to a different room and we'll load our NPC. So we got a braided guy with cock eyes, a large four-headed unit with a quiff, a Buffont-styled punk with slanted eyes. I built this with the LabMUD person words on, which I think most of you will probably choose not to. A white-haired hag, pig-nosed elderly woman. So you can see each time we load them up, they're different. And if we do like look at their skills, for example, so this guy got light, pierce, medium, edge, and westron. This one got swimming, etc. And then if we have a look at them, you'll find that in all cases their luck is going to be the highest attribute as well. So there you go. They've all got random names, they've all got random descriptions, they're all different ages, different heights, etc. So that's variable NPC templates. Now let's say that you had loaded a random soldier, this Buffont-styled punk with slanted eyes. Let's see what their name is. Otar, son of Belagorn. Let's say you had this random NPC, they just so happen to be pretty kick-ass in some sort of event, and you want to make sure that you can load them again and not lose them. You can create an NPC template with the make command. You can technically use this to clone PCs as well. So another scenario is if you had, for example, a player who had retired or was leaving or was becoming an admin, but their PC held an important place in the world and you wanted to turn them into an NPC. And this works with dead players as well. So you could have a long dead PC. Oh, there they go, wandering off. You could have a long dead PC resurrected and then use that as a base to like edit them into a zombie or something like that. There's lots of cool things you could do. NPC make is how you do that. So, but we're going to do it with a targeted thing at the moment. Once the punk wanders in, and we'll call him Buffont. Nope. So it's made a new one here. It's basically copied all of the stuff that was unique about that guy, all his skills, his languages, his stats, everything's there. So now NPC edit submit NPC review all. If we want to load this guy, we can just load him multiple times. So that's one thing you can do there. It didn't actually put any AI routines on it, so because it's copying it as if it's a character, it doesn't know about AI routines, so these copies won't wander around. Incidentally, I I should probably also cover, let's just say you really want this punk to stop wandering around. So possess is how you take control of NPCs in this engine. But as you can tell, even though I'm animating this NPC, my AI routines are still going. So what I want to do is go pause AI, or is it just pause? Yes, pause. So if you type pause while you're in an NPC, it will stop any of their AI routines from going. So now none of the AI routines will fire. And if you decide, I'll make sure, by the way, I return and go find, where'd he go? Lost him. There he is. So he's going to stay there indefinitely until I type pause again, and the AI routines will resume. Incidentally, if you are a door guard when you're in an NPC, door guard toggles on or off door guard mode, and if they're an enforcer, enforcer toggles off on or off enforcer mode. So that's you need to do that before they'll start doing those things, but you can also turn them off if you want them to stop doing that, or you could have, I don't know, some kind of routine where where they only stand in front of the door at certain hours and then they wander off or whatever. But that's building NPCs and using them, some basics of interacting with them. There it goes. The AI is kicked in again. How do we get these NPCs into the game? So what we're going to learn about next is NPC spawners. So NPC spawners are one way that you can get NPCs into the game. You've already seen me manually load them. That's one option. You can load them in progs. There is a command in the prog to load NPCs, so you could do everything through progs or whatever if you want to, and that's the way that I did it in LabMUD. But I have also since made NPC spawners. So NPC spawners are basically just that. They monitor zones, look at populations of particular NPCs, and have a target level of population that they want to keep that NPC at. And then if they dip below that population, they load the NPCs. So let's create one. And we're going to call it Gondorian Spawner. So they're pretty simple. There's two strategies. There's a strategy called simple and there's a strategy called territorial. I will add more of those over time, but for now those are the only two I have. Territorial works with a kind of AI which I don't have an example of in the Cedar, which is a territorial AI which you can use on like peak predators and whatnot, where they'll actually claim a territory up to a particular size and they won't overlap territory with like NPCs. So you could have like a, I don't know, a crocodile or something like that claims a bunch of territory and other crocodiles that will go and claim different territory that doesn't overlap, and they'll stay out of each other's territories. But they'll aggressively attack anybody who comes into their territory as long as they're in their territory. So you can have a spawner that works with that, and that particular spawner type will make sure that there is a valid place for that NPC to claim territory when they spawn them. But beyond the topic of this video, so for this case we're just going to do a simple strategy. You have to set a template. So the NPC template we're going to watch for, I think, is going to be variable Gondorian. We're going to we're actually going to set an on spawn prog, and I've got a different one. So demo on, not demo on load prog. I want demo on load prog echo. So this is just a contrived example. Demo on load prog. It was telling me it didn't have a prog. Demo on load echo. No prog. Demo on. Okay, that is case sensitive for some reason. Oh no, I misspelled echo. There we go. So, all this one does is that it echoes to everybody that is in Shard 2, which is where we are. A new contender has entered the arena. Quite a contrived example, but it's just to show that this is working. So the NPCs set spawn demo on load echo. These can be in addition to the ones that they get. So it's not an either or, you can have both. And technically this one will run after the NPC's regular one. So if order is important. But you can do it either on the NPC template or you could do it through the spawner if you wanted, for example, to recycle the same template on multiple spawners but have a different logic on the on spawn prog or whatever. That's something you could do. We have we need to have a target count. Actually, let's start by putting a zone. So they'll watch particular zones. We're going to say that they're going to watch Homelandia, which is the zone that we're currently in. And now, if you'll notice, it's updated its current count. So there are currently 5 in the zone, which are that 5 that we loaded earlier. So let's actually set its target to 7. So it'll try and keep 7 of them in the zone at a time. And we'll put the minimum at 5. So it will only kick in when it falls to 5. So you can have the population have to fall to, like, you can have it to be 0, for example. You have to totally wipe them out before it will respawn them, or you could do it, at 1 below your target or whatever. It's up to you. The counts as prog allows you to further specialize it, so maybe not all Gondorian variables count. Maybe something about them, like maybe it's keeping a certain number of them blonde-haired, or you're looking for males or something like that. I don't know. You can specialize it if you want. We're not going to in this case. And we need to set some locations where it will spawn. So where are we here? 9 and 24. Now that's basically NPCs list. That's basically everything we need to get it going, but it's not active at the moment. And the reason is that it starts with the always false is active prog, because you don't want it starting to spit things out while you're still building it. So the last thing once you finish building it is to set the active prog. I'm going to set it to always true, but you can set it to other stuff as well. Actually, I'll give you an example. Is night in Homelandia? So this prog here, is night in Homelandia, just basically looks at this zone and checks to see whether it's currently night. Nothing too fancy. And if we run this at the moment, we will see that it is not currently night because it is currently morning. 11 a.m. for example. So if we look at the list again, it's still inactive. But if it ticked over to nighttime, that would become active. But for the sake of getting this one going, we're going to set it to always true, which is one of the progs that's always there. So it is currently active. Now it is active, and it should, sometime within the next 30 seconds, notice that it doesn't have 7 NPCs in this zone and spawn 2 of them. We would expect to see the echo to the zone twice, and we may or may not see them loaded into the room we're in, because it could choose either of the 2 rooms. So let's, I'm patient, so I'm going to see how long it's going to be. 132 seconds, gee whiz. What can we talk about for the next 2 minutes while we're waiting for that to happen? Final thoughts. What's next? I need to make some more AIs for you guys so that you can add those to your NPCs. You can... no, I got nothing. That's pretty much everything you need to know about building NPCs. So NPCs, simple variable. You can make them from PCs. You can turn variable ones into simple templates. You'll use both of them in different scenarios. They function just like characters. Use spawners to put them in the world. You can also put them in the world in different ways. They're fully persistent once they're in the world. It's not like in RPI engine, for example, where the variable ones would reset when you rebooted or when the zone reset. They're fully persistent once they're in the world. You can kill them and resurrect them as well. They function just like player characters. So if we kill this quiff, for example, he'll have a corpse there. In FutureMUD, it's very easy to resurrect people. That turns a corpse back into a player. Perfectly ordinary way to do it. And you know, if they had died because of some effect, like you'd beheaded them, you have to restore their head before you resurrect them, or they'll just die again. But yeah, resurrect, very easy if you accidentally kill an NPC or something like that. The punks here. Alright, we're back in 24. How much longer we got? Oh boy, 4 seconds. That feels like it was longer than 4 seconds. Maybe it has to be below the minimum count. Oh. I'll look at that as a... You know what? I can pause the video and make it come back. So I'll pause it and there we go. Alright, we're back. 15 seconds until it fires. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. There we go. So we got 2 entering the arena as we expected. It loaded 2 of them, ran the prog twice obviously and did the echo, and 1 of them was put into this location. 1 of them must have been put into, was it 9 or 5? So there you go. That is building NPCs. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.